The Garden of Luxembourg, published in 2015, appears in English and French. Tonight, Neginsky unveils her newest book of poetry titled Longings. It was written in English and inspired in part by the works of Chicago-based Ukrainian artist Lyubov Momot. What a lovely thing. Now poetry can be read silently or read out loud. Each is a different experience. At this program, Richard Reeder and I will give voice to some of Rosina's poetry. You will also hear Michael Konisnecht read a piece of prose from Longings. Altogether, we hope these readings serve to capture the myriad of feelings and thoughts that find their lives in Neginsky's words. So, please help me warmly welcome poet and fellow club member Rosina Neginsky to the stage.
Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. I also would like to thank the Cliff Dwellers, Leslie Reich, for organizing this event. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to be here. Can you hear me now? But I do have a practical question. I need somehow to connect the PowerPoint. Is there a way to do that? Oh, maybe. That would be great. Flash drive, yes. Um, when I begin to work on my presentation, I asked myself a question: how the poet can be also an art and literary critic of his or her works. But because some part of my profession is literary art criticism, I try to look at my poetry from a very detached point of view, as if it wasn't me who wrote it. And I try to analyze it from that point of view. Hence, what I would like to do is to talk about the general structure of the book and what I think is the inspiration for this book, but at the same time, because I'm also the author of this book, to go into some precise, very particular details that maybe the outside readers might notice only after numerous readings of the same poem. I would love to have a PowerPoint representation because it's important to show some images. But before we have that opportunity, probably I would like to start by stating that my poetry comes from very different sources. My poetry basically is the result of impressions related to art, often artworks, literary works, some events, some emotions, some encounters, but I never retell or tell the story. What is interesting to me is create a feeling associated with what I have felt when I encountered the particular phenomena. We are going to read a certain number of poems today, and oh, thank you. Sorry, is it here? Is it the flash drive or this one? Doesn't seem to end here. and here. Maybe lower. PC. Maybe if you click PC here.
It's loading up.
It's loading.
I don't see it popping up.
No, I don't see it popping up. Oh, device and driver. Okay. While it's loading, I will continue talking. Some of my poems were inspired by artwork of contemporary Ukrainian-based painter whose name is Lyubov Momot. And in order to explain more the effects that a particular art had on my poetry, I really would love to show you her paintings. In my book, there are two particular poems that are inspired by her work. One is called Attic, and the other one is Conspiracy. The cover of my book. Do you have another computer? Maybe would be nice. The cover of the book is also inspired by her painting, by one of her works, and in my poems, I don't really use the entire work. What I do, there are some images that appear in this painting that somehow reappear in my own work. For example, the image of a snail seems to me very important because for the artist Lyubov Momot, snail is the symbol of her inner world, where she needs to be present while she creates. And periodically, she gets out in order to feed herself from the environment and to go back to the snail and to continue that creativity. Because there is some kind of interchange between the outside and inside world. And this is something that, for me, is interesting, and I picked on that, and it does reappear in my own work. There are two paintings that, two poems that have direct relationship with Momot's painting, which I hope to be able to show, or maybe we can do it through the internet. I don't know if it's a computer or because she has a site, and maybe we will be able to do that. Okay. One is called Attic Secrets, and the painting represents a head of a woman bird attacked by wooden, very aggressive birds. And the painting is called Attic Secrets because it's a metaphor for head. It's a metaphor for thoughts. And just a second. And then there is another poem that we will read that is also inspired by her painting called tender conspiracy. And what impressed me in that particular painting that is in the book, but unfortunately not in colors, is the usage of mixed media on the one hand and of incredible colors on the other hand. Perfect. Here we are. Has photo gallery. Yeah, photo gallery. I think we can just note at the top. Oh, here. Dreamland. Okay, we can start. Спасибо большое. Я не уверена. I'm not sure. Я хочу это, давайте. Не тут.
This one?
Ага.
Okay.
Ага. And the first one.
The first one?
Ага. У меня стихотворение. Maybe with... Oh, perfect.
Yeah, it's just
Perfect.
very slow.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
okay?
so much. Yes. We cannot see the entire painting here, but we can see,
Okay.
you can get an idea. It's called Tender Conspiracy. And it's a painting. Thank you very much. Oh, it's gone. Sorry. Back to here. Now. Okay. I was very impressed by this work. And what really interests me, of course, the beauty of this work is striking, but my poetry never describes what is in the painting. It's a story. I use usually the artwork or the literary work or whatever I use as a point of the, I use usually artwork or literary work or whatever I use for my creativity as a point of departure. Hence, this painting was a point of departure to talk of the idea of conspiracy. And I created two poems inspired by this particular work. One is in Russian and another one is in English. And they are both different. They take the idea of conspiracy, but they tell a completely different story. In the story in Russian, the third character becomes a victim of a conspiracy. In the story in English, that is written with much more humor, the humor that I also see in this particular painting, the person whom is these two are conspiring against, he becomes the winner. Hence, just to tell you that it's just an inspirational moment. Or the painting, another painting that I have mentioned, that is the painting Attic Secrets. It's very slow, unfortunately. Here. Here. This is the painting that is on the cover of my book, and it's called Prayer for the Free Soul. And that's the snail that I was talking about. And you can see there are also butterflies, and butterflies in Greek mythology are associated with the idea of a soul and freedom. But I never used this painting as a whole, as an inspiration. I only use some images from this painting as vignettes for my own poems. Another poem that I have mentioned is Attic Secrets. It's kind of sad because I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but here. It's a very striking work. No. This is the work that I'm trying to show you. But what particularly inspired me is this image. The head was a metaphor for the attic, and the birds, that is a metaphor for the thoughts. And in my poem takes its own direction, and it talks about the struggle that one has with his inner world, with his thoughts, and how sometimes it's difficult to get rid and kind of free ourselves of aggressivity, of power, of what is happening within us. Because this is an example of poems that were inspired by artwork. In my book, I also have a number of works that are inspired by literary works. And in particular, there is a poem called Please Don't Tell Me. And that particular poem find its root in the poetry of a wonderful American 19th century poet, Emily Dickinson. But I'm specifically was impressed and touched by the play that I saw a few years ago at the Court Theatre. It's a play by an English dramaturge, playwright. His name is William Luce, and the play is called A Belle from Amherst, because Emily Dickinson was from Amherst, and it's a one-person play in which Emily Dickinson the character uses her poetry, her life to narrate her story. It's a very powerful play, and my poem was strongly impacted by what I saw, but at the same time, the question that I ask in my poem that I guess is important for any creative artist: will our art live beyond us? And how important it is for the art to go beyond our time? And in the case of Emily Dickinson, you probably know, none of her poems were published during her lifetime, and her life as a poet began after her death. And this is an example of a poem that was inspired by a literary work. I also have another poem that I will talk about closer to the reading, called Rebecca and the Night, inspired by, partially, of course, by Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe. And some of my poems are inspired by dreams. But once again, I use my dreams only as a point of departure to create a certain world, but there is an idea that develops completely independently of what is happening in my dream. And one of the examples is a poem, Joy, that we will read here. Hence, I will give you an opportunity to listen to poems, and probably we will have some discussion or some introduction of the poems before we read them, and then you will have an opportunity to ask questions and we can discuss it. Thank you. And so I guess now we are going to proceed to the reading and have Eve, Richard, and Michael. And I will be also reading one of the poems, but I can introduce each poem. The first poem will be read by Yves Morin, and it's called Conspiracy, and it's the poem that I talked about. It's the poem inspired by Lyubov Momot's painting, Tender Conspiracy.
Conspiracy. Two fools in colorful hoods in the midst of the witchcraft want to steal the life of the third one. Why? Because he has a longer nose, bluer eyes, malicious smile, provocative mind, unforgivable. The third does not yet know what awaits. His naive soul is full of hope. Once there were three fools in colorful hoods. Now only one remains. He has a charming, malicious smile. What happened to two others? Witchcraft stole their lives away. It was an easy mistake to make.
Next point will be read by Richard Rieder, and it's called Attic. And as I have mentioned, this is the poem that was inspired by Lyubov Momot's painting Attic Secrets. Unfortunately, the technology is betraying us, but
Okay. All right. Attic. Noise. Cracking, snaking through my attic. A heap of dusty junk full of colorful flying birds. They sing. Dragonflies, summer buzz, moan, lonely woman in pain. Weep, wounded man in trenches, human corpses around. Screech, mice squabbling in house walls. Screeching beats me, moaning hits me. Birds weep, I never sleep. That sunny day, my mind was blank, like the front of an empty white page, and was numb. I took a gun. Silence entered my life. The birds' little bodies lay on the floor. They do not fly, do not sing, do not moan, do not weep, do not screech. They smell, a smell of rotten bread. I am unable to get rid of it. I have to live with it. Oh, these birds, even when they do not seem alive, they wander within me and disturb my nights. A snail soul hibernating in its shell, black olives, a triangle glance, sharp knife, paint in red my back, stars rarely shining in the sky, a fat satyr dressed in green shorts, tapping at my house roof all night, a spring rain beating me, my past, dolls of fear, flying away drops of motley life, dancing its macabre dance. My attic will never be free of its dusty junk.
now, thank you. Now we are going to move to the next poem that will be read by Yves Morin, and this is a poem that I mentioned. It's called Please Don't Say, that was inspired by Emily Dickinson and specifically by the play, The Lady from Amherst.
Please don't say you don't know. Your words are a golden knife. They sharply chop. We never know. We go, then we are going. We just and shut the door. Fate following behind us bolts it, and we accost no more. Your words are pomegranates ground seeds, red wine red blood. Heart, we will forgive him, you and I, tonight. You may forget the warmth he gave. I will forget the light. They bring you to life. They sing about us. 100 years passed. Me, him, you. 100 years passed. Women, colorful dolls dressed in multicolored fur and shape-changing art. Men, black cockroaches, brown ants wearing white ties, became one. Trees of dark blue, holes in their trunks bear twig arms. Don't say, you don't know. You watch how they dress. Your mortal eye in a white dress and take it away at night to the unknown, beyond the ocean, sparkling broken crystal house, silent shore of far away, on the wondrous sea. In the silent west, many sails at rest, their anchors fast. Thither I pilot thee, land ho, eternity, ashore at last. Today, tomorrow, you watch and dance. In the hall with blinking light, where dark yellow water washes the wall with its laugh, in a castle of never-ending days, where icy sun rains its rainbow rays, between movements rhythm, boots creaking, your voice, your words, sing anguish of your monochrome, dove's inner cry, scream motley words of butterflies restlessly pollinating flowers of your eye. Your daemon's rhythm is a minuet in words. Time, a gray swamp, your friend, pushes you out, not in. 200 years. I lose my breath. My heart stops to beat when I hear your voice. His in her hearts. Trees of dark blue, holes in their trunks bear twig arms. We'll feel it too when your words knock at their doors. You knew. Please don't say you did not know.
And now we are going to move to a prose piece because my book contains three prose pieces. We will read here one. Michael Koningsher, do I pronounce it right? Will read the work called Painting. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. The work itself, it's in prose, it's not poetry, will tell about itself. Please.
Paintings. Such an interesting work of art. He was standing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, peering into a painting. Does he really think it is interesting? Probably not. No. It is good, but boring. Strikingly boring. Why does he want to think that it is interesting? This is his third time in front of this work of art. Courbet's dark-haired shepherdess sitting in the middle of the blooming summer field. The first time they met by this painting. He came here to please her because she said it was her favorite work of art. He arrived early and he first saw the painting and only later noticed her. After he looked at her, he looked at the painting again. She and the painting seemed alike. They both possessed the beauty of an evergreen forest, broken by an unexpected appearance of prairie fields, softly colored in yellow and violet, illuminated by a melancholic summer sun, but neither were thunder striking. The second time they met in front of this painting again. To him, the painting looked the same. It was pure and beautiful, but she was not beautiful. She was striking. Though her pale face and deep, innocent eyes, he peered into her hidden well, her eye, and it seemed vibrant as drops of warm spring rain ready to slightly touch with a dandelion kiss the lips of the motley world. Tender as a clawless green-eyed cat he'd played with when he was 5 years old, and passionate as Cleopatra, ready to wrap her thin freckled arms around Antony's fat ox neck. He could not take his eyes off her pale face. He was mesmerized by the irises of her eyes, the color of which appeared at moments to be deep pine needle green and brown, like soil after a short, hot rain, or yellow, like the face of a sick girl recovering from exhausting her body through consumption. To him, the painting suddenly appeared deep and innocent as her eyes. The third time, he came alone and stood for a long time in front of the painting. He wanted to see through the painting her pale, blue-eyed face and her unfathomably infinite soul. But he saw nothing. He only saw the landscape, a boring, well-painted landscape. He laughed. Fine lines appeared around his laughing dark eyes. He laughed again and again. All his elegant silhouette, dressed in a light and fine velvet suit, laughed. His laugh was bitter. With a lingering glance, he peered again into the painting. He thought that he smiled. The painting now was peering back at him. Did he appear to it as it appeared to him, peaceful, beautiful, and boring? He thought of her and he could no longer remember whether she was peaceful and beautiful or peaceful and boring. He smiled again. His smile was radiant, and the visitor standing next to him smiled too, either at the painting or at him. Then his and the visitor's eyes met, and they smiled at each other. The visitor left, but he stayed. He thought he smiled again, and then he thought that he laughed. Suddenly, he began to notice that his cheeks were wet. He sensed that wetness on his nose and his neck. It tasted salty.
I hope the story was clear. That is basically a story of a lost love that happens in front of the painting. And there is that identification between the painting and the person who the main character was supposed to meet by that painting, already met. And every time he saw the painting in a different way, because the environment and the atmosphere related to his feelings were very different. And that's what I try to convey in that work. And now we are going to move to a short poem that will be read by Yves Morin, and it's called I Want to Go to Japan. And I guess there is nothing to say about it except just to listen to that.
Such a colorful, motley bazaar. Gray-green, serious eyes. I want to go to Japan, he said. But why? She asked. It is honest and clean. What's there? Love. Bodies interwoven in embrace. And then I want to go to Japan. It is honest and clean. My love will vanish then. My desire will die. She got up and left, and he remained alone.
Thank you. One of my friends and colleagues, who's a literary critic, he said that there is some similarity in not necessarily in a stylistic way, but in the meaning of, in the sense of a meaning, with the poetry of a Russian poet whose name is Anna Akhmatova. But it's a whole story. And so we're going to move to another poem that Richard Ritter is going to read to us, and it's called Woman in Grey. I do want, it should be Woman in Grey. I should say that I do want to mention a few words about this poem, because in that poem I was trying to convey a feeling of a struggle that people who love each other might encounter when one of the people is ill, old, and is going to die. Hence, it's about the feeling that is, I try to convey the feeling. I heard the story, somebody told me the story about what that person was going through before she lost her husband, and I was deeply touched, and it gave birth to that poem called A Woman in Grey.
The woman in gray walked in. She sneaks up on him. She jinxes him. She wants to steal him from me. He is on fire. It burns inside, robbing him of color outside. He is pale as a bleak day. Doubts, ants running over him, scratch him. I pull him to me. Hope, a reflection in transparent glass of a bleak false sun, dresses him. She pulls him to her. He pushes her away, but she clings and she clings to him. At times, small holes instead of eyes hide her unknown inside. Her face is shapeless, its color dull. Deep trenches walk over it. Sometimes she seems like a pure dove. Her eyes are dark mountains, brightened by the northern light. She is young as an early spring, dressed in a sleeveless silk dress, color of the blue sky. The summer is on its way. She is strong, stronger than him and me. He argues with her, she caresses him. He screams at her, she embraces him. He puzzles at her, she smiles to him. What is your name? He asks her. She tells him to call her Fatigue. What is your name? I ask her. She tells me that she has no name. Some tell us that when she comes in her sleeveless blue sky-hue dress, she brings an internal spring, which we call death. He loved, loved.
And there are two words. It ends with a song. He loved, loved, loved me, and then he abandoned me. And then he betrayed me, or something like that. Thank you, Richard. And next poem will be read by Yves Morin. And this is a poem called Rebecca in the Night. And that was inspired by Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe. But the poem itself deals with the question of eternal life, love, and if with the idea if two souls are meant, if they are really meant to be with each other, are they meant also to cross together centuries and meet with each other across the time? and across centuries. Hence, it's one of, if we believe in reincarnation, and it's one of the questions that that poem asks.
Rebecca in the night. Handsome night. You live in the castle surrounded by a moat. All windows are covered up. You wear chainmail with shield in the heart. You protect your castle by fire and sword, and often you leave it to go to foreign lands to kill and to burn in the name of Christ, your God. One day in your travels, while riding your wild horse, you noticed me crossing a dusty street. I was thin and young. My huge black eyes, a full moon, met your green eyes hidden under the metal mask. You saw my long dark braid surround my biblical oval face. I touched your metal heart. You got off the horse. Oh, okay. You got off the horse, chivalrously gave me your right hand, and with your left took out your sword. You put me close to you on your wild horse, and now, together with you, I ride to the unknown world. It has been 8 centuries. While holding hands, we cross centuries. Sometimes years separate us, sometimes centuries. But then we meet again, we hold hands again and cross centuries. Our castle became a house full of mice and dirt, where the windows are clothed. But through the fog of a dream, the exotic beauty, its blue jars, tightly woven rugs, accompanies us. You carried love for it throughout centuries. My night. If it happens that destiny makes us go apart, know we will meet again in another century. And holding hands, we will walk side by side toward a new rendezvous in centuries embracing us.
I'm going to make a slight change in the program, and maybe we will eliminate one poem, but I will probably read now a poem called Bluebird. And I would like to tell a couple of words about that poem. You probably all know that the bluebird, the notion of a bluebird, is associated with the idea of happiness. And you are probably familiar with the play by the Belgian playwright, end of the 19th century, Maurice Maeterlinck, who wrote a play called Bluebird. It's a very interesting play, and it's still played all over the world in different languages. And it's a story of a couple that decided that they want to find a bluebird, and they go around the world looking for that bluebird, and they don't find it. And finally, when they come home to their house, they realize that the bluebird was in their backyard. Hence, you can understand the idea of that play. And in my case, bluebird is associated with creative process. And in my poem, I talk about the artist who is struggling with her or his own inner world and the effect of the outside world, or of the interaction between the outside and the inside world, and the process of creativity. Hence, these are the questions that all this that the poem deals with, and eventually it also deals with the question of fear that the artist might have, knowing that he might meet that bluebird, because in some ways it's an incredible power to realize that something you create is really realized and it's really here. And sometimes it's also a very painful process. Hence, these are the issues that that poem brings up. And I'll share that with you right now. Um, just a second. Bluebird. Colorless wind blows, my pencil draws, my brush colors, dolls, puppets in yellow, monsters, crippled goblins, angels in gray chain mails, Côte de Maille. Barefoot demons wave to me. Canvas, my hidden invisible wall shapes it. I'm a doll, doll is me, I'm all who wave to me. Let's go, your creatures. A rainy voice whispers to me. They are your bluebird. They are free. I yearn for you, my bluebird. I do not see you. I only hear your wings beat on my door. I do not want to open it. You frighten me. My pencil draws, my brush colors. I'm a doll. Doll is me. I go after you, my bluebird. I want you close to me. The beating of your wings scares me. Your big bricks breaks my door. You stand at the threshold. You wave at me with your large blue wings. You stare. Your eyes are dark dots in the midst of the blooming dark blue bush. I see you, my bluebird. And the next poem that we are going to read is by Richard Reader will read it, and it's called Glance.
Glance. I threw a glance into the mirror and saw it. A glance. My glance. Violet aster frozen by the summer heat, deafened by the blues of the meowing twilight wind, blinded by bites of the buzzing striped bees. It smiled at me. Flames jumped out of it. I invited it to go for a walk in the park, a floral one filled with black-eyed irises, cross-eyed orchids, bushy, multicolored roses, spring-scenting narcissus. My glance fell in love with a rose, yellow with burgundy streaks, soaked in the astringent scent. Since then I look into the mirror. When I meet my glance, it is unrecognizable. My pencil draws, my brush colors. I am a doll. Doll is me. I go after you, my bluebird. I want you to close me.
It's not the right.
Glance.
No, no, no.
Oh, you said glance.
Glance, but this is from another poem.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Here.
where is it?
You maybe need to start from the beginning
Okay.
because the meaning is.
Okay, let's start again. Sorry. Okay, see what happens when we go out of order? You know, I always had the other poem in my hand. Okay, all right, let's start again. I threw a glance into the mirror and saw it, a glance, my glance. Violet aster, frozen by the summer heat, deafened by the blues of the meowing twilight wind, blinded by bites of the buzzing striped bees. It smiled at me. Flames jumped out of it. I invited it to go for a walk in the park, a floral one, filled with black-eyed irises, cross-eyed orchids, bushy multicolored roses, spring-scenting narcissus. My glance fell in love with the rose, yellow with burgundy streaks, soaked in the astringent scent. Since then, I look into the mirror, and when I meet my glance, it is unrecognizable. Love's clawless paws, like a green sea wave, embrace it. Its touch is a soft, wet summer haystack. Love peels its white skin, spoiled milk, dresses it in a newborn's pink, smelling of cacao and chocolate. Motley youth takes it under its featherless wing, and I, together with it, am invited to dance a swing on its wing. We swing. My glance sees only azure sky. For me, earth has died. We fly, it and I. We do not look in each other's eyes. The brushy rose took over my glance, whereas I, its liberated serf, take off my worn old suit to follow it.
I don't know if it was, thank you, if it was clear from the poem that it's a poem about the power of love. And it's a poem about the power of falling in love, how it can change the appearance of the person that has, and the feeling, how it can change the appearance of the person. And you can see there is that the same person that has herself or himself, but at the same time has the glance. And the glance is the expression of the inner world, of what is happening within it. And we are going to finish the program with two short poems. One will be read by Yves Morin. It's called Joy. And I told you about the poem, about the fact that some of my poetry is inspired by dreams. And this is an example of that poetry, of that poem. And what is kind of interesting for me was to explore the feeling that the dream can have on our day, on our behavior, on our life in general. And in some ways, it's a parallel life. And we will finish it with the poem Clairvoyant, which will be read by Yves Morin and Richard Rieder together. But I'm giving the upper table to Yves Morin. It's in the book, if you like. Okay.
Joy. A bushy rose, vested in white and pink, caressed by the blue twilight, appears in front of me and invites me to play in the Garden of Lights. Irises, her obedient subjects, ceremoniously bow to me. Their violet faces, eyes, black and gray dots, slightly laugh at me. They tend me, elongated hand leaves, to dance a slow triangular minuet. I dance and play with them, feeling their fragile stems, looking into their eye specks, while their voluptuous mistress, the rose, approaches me. I take her thin stem in my slightly fearful hand. Its needle thorns bite me. My fingers bleed. It is fresh like morning dew, with slightly bitter ginger scent, making me forget the pain in my hand. I open my eyes. Lightness and joy surround me. I'm searching for the cat, brown and green, to stare at me, ready to bite, for the lace of snow to strangle me, for the Turkish knife moon to scrub my back, to leave the flakes of shapeless blood on my bed. Instead, green, egg-like, eyed princess snail, wearing the triangular capron hat, appears in front of me. Her right freckled hand touches my dark paddle eyes. Her left tends me, white iris with yellow specks. It tickles my slightly wrinkled rosy neck. Lightness and joy surround me.
Thank you. And the final poem, which Richard and Eve will read together, they shared the reading, is, as a matter of fact, inspired by a real event in my life. I met a clairvoyant. Of course, the poem doesn't necessarily have to do something with the meeting, but that imagery of a clairvoyant did impact me, and I tried to convey the feeling that I had after that encounter.
Clairvoyant. The dancing, hopeful world, colorful, desperate hanged men, pink lovers in black colors, fighting for a place under the sign of choice. Hermit, tired from lonely existence and God, hopeless priest. Cards, dice, jump out of my yellow trembling hands under her closely watching gaze. Hearts and spades, against me. Forgive me, she whispers, her voice a cat in heat. Your future is boredom. It does not seem to be you. Euros rattle in our hands, her fixed glance and dry future. Not mine, accompany me to the door. I leave them behind in a small, stuffy room with no windows, no air, with an ageless woman, a futureless fortune teller. Fear of a heavy, unmovable mass. Translucent boredom mixed with a sparkling fear of day walking by, filled with a colorless, empty space, gray leaves with gray trees with no leaves, brought me to you, and I moved away, rebelled.
I walk in an
Yes. Oh, that's. Can answer it this way. Was it difficult to follow the poems? Sorry? Not painting. I don't paint. Although I do teach art history and I write art criticism, I don't paint. And I do play. I play piano and I write, but I don't paint. Somehow, it never happened. Yes.
Is your book available? Your latest book of poetry is available right now?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the bookstore was supposed to bring it, but I don't know if they did. But I do have no. It didn't show up. It's ironic. But I do have 3 books here. That's all I have, unfortunately. But the rest, yeah, we had some issue with getting the books, but I have 3 books with me. That's the only thing that is available, unfortunately. Yes.
What languages do you dream in?
You know, I dream in images.
In English?
In images.
Images.
I don't really, and also it depends. Yeah, I really dream in images. Yeah, color images, I would say. And I also think I don't think in languages. Once again, I think in images. And it depends also in the circumstances. If I'm thinking about something that related in the situation of English environment, English speaking environment, then maybe the thoughts will be in English. But if it's French or Russian, the thoughts would appear according to the language. But in principle, it's in images.
Rosina, I'll make a comment. I'm glad you showed us the picture of the conspirator,
Mhm.
conspirators, because that really helped me get into that poem.
I know.
Is it wise for a poet to go beyond describing the source of the inspiration into how the poem should be interpreted? Because I was finding in some of the readings that what I was taking
Mhm.
from the poem was different from, I was kind of fighting my own interpretation
Mhm.
against the one that was described.
No,
Is it the case or is it not?
I fully agree with you, and it's something that I heavily hesitated to do, because I do think art is suggestive, and everyone, especially poetry, and especially maybe this type of poetry, and everyone should be able to interpret it according to his own reading, because it's also a form of creativity. But because kind of was supposed to talk about my process of writing, I shared um, I shared the sources of my inspiration, but it's absolutely not prescribed. And as a matter of fact, conspiracy, for instance, is just an example. Myself, I said that I mentioned that I wrote that poem in different languages, but it doesn't matter the language. I basically wrote 2 completely different poems that came out from that particular painting, and I fully agree with you. And it's something that I was very hesitant of doing. Yeah, it's a good point. Is there something else? Yes, Leslie. I agree, because sometimes the insights and the background sometimes the insights and the background are extremely important, even to find one's own direction, your own direction of interpretation. And so I agree. Yeah, that's also true. But I guess each reader has its own way of being. But it's interesting what you said, because I don't really think so. I think that the art should be universal, and there isn't really division between men and women. I don't know, but because I do know, for instance, there is a writer. She's not a poet, she's a prose writer. Her name is Marguerite Yourcenar. She was a woman, as you can hear through her name, but when you read her work, you wouldn't be able to determine whether she's a man or she's a woman, who she is, because there is something in her writing that has that universal power. But of course, in some cases, there is a difference between feminine and masculine writing. But in some cases, I wouldn't say so, because there is that universal humanity that comes out, and a general gift, a talent for writing. That's at least my impression. I'm not talking about my particular poetry, but this is kind of my observation, I would say. Mhm. Thank you. Somebody else? Okay. And we have 3 books, that's all.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Nina, for a great talk. And thank you, Richard, for the readings, and Michael. Oh, okay, yeah. And I hope you'll pick up a copy of Rosina's book. And yes, Madison Books is just a wonderful place to get that from. And wishing you all a lovely evening and a great weekend.
Thank you.
I don't know. This is yours. Is that ours?